We got up to all sorts on the Time Team podcast in 2025.
From the burial mounds of Sutton Hoo to Henry VIII's flagship, we experienced it all and brought you along for the ride.
Today we're looking back at our best bits on the Time Team podcast.
Happy New Year from Time Team and welcome to the Time Team podcast with Helen Geek and Martyn Williams, where later on you'll get an update from the Sutton Hoo Ships Company as they work to recreate an Anglo-Saxon ship using traditional techniques. And they need your help.
They do need your help. More details on that to come then very, very soon. First, let's dive in, shall we, into some of the things that we've enjoyed bringing you right here on the Time Team podcast in 2025.
Now, I love watching Time Team's landscape archaeologist Stewart Ainsworth decode the ups and downs, the lumps and bumps. He took Martyn to Bodbury Ring in Shropshire, where he'd made an astonishing discovery, which has completely changed the way that we think about this Iron Age site.
Stewart! Hello!
Get my belt on first. There we go. Okay. You know where you're going, don't you, Patrick?
Yes. We're off to Bodbury Ring.
We're in the Cardy Mill Valley in Shropshire, which is near Church Stretton, and we're currently going up to look at a hill fort, an Iron Age hill fort known as Bodbury Ring. I'll tell you more about it when we get up there. I'm sometimes convinced that it's the only skill I've actually developed in expertise at.
Well, after Stewart finally finished moaning, we got up a little higher and saw the landscape we were going to be exploring. We stopped to get a good view of Bodbury Ring, which is up there on that ridge, and Stewart was keen to put this whole area in context.
As you can see all around us, it's hills everywhere. Hills on the side of a big valley over there, hills behind me. Over there we've got 3 hill forts on hilltops. Hill forts almost everywhere over that side. But on this side of the valley, there's only one hill fort known about called Bodbury Ring. And that's on the extreme left of the ridge that you can see over there, right on the very edge of it. There's a little bush at the moment, and even from here I can see earthworks. These have been recorded for a long time. This is the 19th century, the site of a small Iron Age hill fort. But what the work I did here has demonstrated is that that's only a very small part of what was a huge Iron Age, or possibly even late Bronze Age hill fort that went all the way across that ridge with a rampart going all the way round the crest of it, right down to where the fence is when it drops down where it's green over there. I mean, this is a kind of phenomenal discovery in many ways because it takes us back thousands of years. It shows us that there was a hill fort on this side of the valley. So the importance of that can't be underestimated in terms of politics of Iron Age landscapes and Bronze Age landscapes, something we knew nothing about. And looking at a LiDAR and coming out and having a look, it's revealed a whole new, really exciting story.
Well, we needed a closer look, so back in the Land Rover and up to the top of that ridge, the views are amazing from up here. It is just spectacular. And what's weird as well is you drive along a golf course as well. Look, there's people playing golf. Anyway, it's time to say goodbye to our lift, and Stewart and I walk together towards a really important part of this defensive structure. Standing here gives you a really good idea of this structure. I mean, just look at the banks piled up really high. This is this bit on the LiDAR, and you can see it's really obvious hill fort with these big banks piled up. This is the very, very tip, the very end of this ridge. But what Stewart has discovered is the hill fort here is actually a lot bigger than that, and it includes a great swathe of this ridge. And people didn't know that before. And Stewart's been walking around here explaining how he found that out.
Finding something like the 2 enclosures here, it doesn't happen every day in archaeology, but the journey started off with looking at the LiDAR. I'm currently just walking around towards the tip there, but around it I could see all these stripes here These are later episodes of medieval ridge and furrow ploughing and even later Napoleonic period ploughing, which have in parts eradicated some of the earthwork, but in the majority it's still here, and it went all the way around like that. And then at a later time, that bit was cut off with a deep ditch through there, and the material piled round the edge of it. The white bit is the rampart I'm currently walking round.
It gives us a whole new perspective on this site. Originally, we thought just the end was occupied. Now we know there were things happening across the whole of this ridge.
It's almost like my thumb, if I can characterise like that. If you can imagine that the earlier hill fort was the whole of my thumb, like that, going around the contour of the hill. At some point later on, probably at least 1,000 years later, in the Iron Age, just the tip was cut off with this ditch here, and a rampart built round the edge to create this very, very small enclosure on the end. And all around it's steep slopes, it's easy to defend, very dominant in the landscape, even still. But the bigger one was at least 6 times bigger than the later one.
Thanks to the research that Stewart's done, we know so much more now about this incredible site. But what do these new revelations reveal about what would have been going on here?
This was here for almost political, territorial reasons in the first place. Rather than it being purely a settlement, it was to make a big impression on the landscape. And that tells us something we didn't really have any concept about when we just thought this was a tiny little hill fort on the end. That didn't have that same presence in the landscape. It's now pretty obvious that this is a place that was chosen deliberately to dominate and to express itself in the landscape.
That shows you how LiDAR can help you focus on the subtle lines that have been obscured by ploughing, doesn't it? You don't notice that on the ground without really detailed observation because your eye's distracted by everything else, and your feet, in a way, are distracted as you walk. But with the LiDAR, you suddenly realise where you need to focus, and lo and behold, you understand it in an entirely different way. Now, Stewart actually joined us at the Roman fort of Branadunum at Brancaster in Norfolk, where Time Team returned last year to do a bit of geophysics.
Yeah, it was really good fun, that, actually. And when we arrived in what to the untrained eye, I would say, looked like, well, kind of any old field, really. You wouldn't know that there's anything special going on. But as I put it to Time Team geophysicist John Gator, there's something very exciting underneath that field.
You tell me.
Well, we know that you've got unfinished business here because people have been champing at the bit for 13 years now to be getting back into this field.
They're not the only people who've been champing at the bit. I couldn't wait to get back.
Yeah.
In fact, I've tried on one occasion and failed dismally. So this is my 3rd attempt on this site.
3rd time lucky.
Yeah.
How's it going?
It's actually going pretty well. Better than I ever expected. And Jimmy and Mike and Lucy are doing amazing work.
Yeah.
And having seen some of their initial results, they're even better than last time.
So last time we got magnetometry everywhere. That worked quite well. And I remember seeing that strip of extraordinary radar down the middle, which was as if you had, I don't know, opened the curtains or turned the light on or something. It was not like anything anybody had ever seen before, that radar.
It was like an X-ray through the ground.
Yes.
But you weren't looking at a body, you were looking at a big section through the Roman fort. And it revealed such detail. We knew you could get that detail using GPR being the acronym for ground penetrating radar. We knew you could get good results. But here, the conditions were perfect, the state of preservation was perfect, and as I say, the detail surpassed our expectations. But as you say, it was only a slice through the middle. And we've wanted to get the whole fort ever since that day. And I say we tried 5 years ago.
Yes, what happened?
Quite embarrassing. We came out, we collected data with similar equipment to what we had in 2012. But there was a connection problem between the GPS and the wheel and the monitor.
So it's a computer, some sort of technical computer error.
Yeah, and nobody could understand what had gone wrong.
Oh no.
So we spent 3 days collecting a lot of data, and when we came to process it, it just did not work. It didn't mesh together. We couldn't see the detail we knew we could achieve.
If that had happened on a 3-day time team, it would have been absolutely disastrous.
Yeah, we'd have been the end of the butt of the jokes.
Yeah.
Non-stop. So we avoided that. We still don't know to this day what was wrong with the data, but it wasn't a simple error. It was a very complex error, and so we couldn't correct it. So to come back with bigger and better equipment is brilliant. And actually having Jimmy and Mike and Lucy again, who, are brilliant.
Well, we're going to come to those people that you've just mentioned in just a moment, because there is a cast of loads of geophysicists here. I mean, this is sort of your dream. This is a good, and we were saying this in previous episodes when we were talking about what was going to go on here. This is a good test of geophysics, isn't it? To sort of see, can it do what we need it to do? So what is it that we want it to do in this field behind us here?
Well, there's actually 2 things, and we're using 2 different techniques. We're using magnetometry, which gives us the landscape picture, all the ditches and pits, the settlement surrounding the fort, as well as within the fort. But the magnetometry is not particularly good at mapping the buildings. That's where the radar comes into play. And the beauty of the radar is it not only maps the buildings, but it goes down through time and it gives us that depth information as well.
Yes, because magnetometry is just kind of two-dimensional, isn't it?
Very two-dimensional.
You just get one slice.
Yeah.
But radar, you can go down metres.
Yes, here we're going down 2.5 metres. The whole of that depth is full of archaeology.
Wow. Gosh, yes, you saw there just how the field looks just like a flat ploughed field. But despite that, the conditions there are brilliant, and the remains of all the buildings are still there, buried under the plough soil. And I can confirm that nothing went wrong this time, and we have nearly 6 billion data points that combine to form the most amazing images.
We were at the pub, weren't we? I don't think we could even say too much about this, but we were at the pub and we saw some things on a laptop and everybody's jaw just dropped. But you are going to have to wait. Watch this space is what I'll say, because the film that we made about that very exciting geophysics and all the developments there at Brancaster, it's in the works right now. It'll be available to watch on YouTube very, very soon.
In 1982, a remarkable discovery was made by Time Team's Francis Pryor on the flat and low-lying land of the East Anglian Fens.
Flag Fen is the site of the largest known wooden prehistoric structure in the UK. It's a causeway that would have stretched for hundreds of metres into the surrounding boggy landscape, and near it, Bronze Age roundhouses where people would have lived for generations.
Oxygen-free conditions under waterlogged ground preserved it for thousands of years, giving us a unique insight into what life might have been like. But the world-famous archaeology of Flag Fen is now under threat, as Francis explained when Martyn went to visit.
Welcome to Flag Fen, and we're now walking down the Roman road that runs across the centre of the site and which we excavated with Time Team over 20 years ago. Over to our left, you can see a row of posts. That's a reconstruction of the causeway that was built here 1,000 years before the Romans built this road. And behind, you can see the outline of round houses. Those are Bronze Age round houses that we have reconstructed based on evidence excavated from the ground. It's arguably the best preserved prehistoric landscape, certainly in Britain and quite possibly in Northern Europe. I was sliding along the drain behind me and I saw bits of wood sticking out of the mud. The axe marks were very clear and we knew they came from a late Bronze Age axe, So it's a Bronze Age site. And what we've done here is that we've reconstructed it as it would have looked 3,000 years ago.
There's so much incredible archaeology here at Flag Fen, but it's under threat. Look at the ground here. It's cracked, it's dried out, and that shouldn't be the case at all. There's plenty of sources of water here. So what's being done to try to stop that from happening?
So we're now standing on the edge of the Flag Fen mere. We constructed it in an effort to keep the archaeology deeply buried beneath our feet now, to keep it wet. When we did it, we thought this would preserve it forever, but subsequent research has shown that actually it is now starting to deteriorate. There is no way that there'll be any wood out here in Flag Fen in 100 years' time. It will all have gone. We can't afford to just to leave it for another 10 years and then do something about it. We must do something about it now while it's still there, and I'm afraid it's rapidly deteriorating.
I'm walking along a replica of the causeway that Francis discovered here many decades ago, and it would have been such an impressive structure, over 1 kilometre in length from end to end. Look at these posts here that would have stood right the way along this structure. They've been doing work to try and preserve the original of this, and it's been taking place in that building behind me.
It's very difficult to see Bronze Age remains, but here we've got them preserved. Everything you can see down there is as it was left 3,000 years ago. And our aim is to preserve it by keeping it wet. That's why we have all the hose pipes, and we have the iron walls which are keeping the water in, so that this little part of Flag Fen will be preserved for much longer than the landscape outside.
The worry, though, is knowledge of this ancient landscape painted on the walls here could be lost forever if the archaeology dries out, and even this impressive preservation work might not be enough to save it.
We know that the ancient wood is deteriorating quite fast. So we've got to do something to excavate it and record what is there now so that we can tell people in the future. And to do this, we're putting together a major research project, and the person to tell you about that is Jacq Mooney, who is the manager at Flag Fen and who's making a lot of the plans.
We're busy working with Cambridge University and Historic England to develop a new research framework. That framework will identify which parts of the causeway we need to excavate first, whilst there's still organic material there to be tested, and what the really important questions are that we still need to answer. What did the causeway look like? How big was it? We're in for a really exciting 5 years where we do a lot of research, a lot of training, and have loads of fun.
Well, this is more or less where I found Flag Fen back in 1982. 50 years later, I now realise, and I think we're all beginning to realise, that Flag Fen is a lot more than just about posts and wood. It's about how people lived their lives in the Bronze Age and why people lived their lives. I think Flag Fen has hugely enriched our perception of the past, and that has enriched our perception of ourselves.
It's a really special place, but as you heard, the threat is very real.
Unfortunately, though, the drying out at the site isn't the only threat it's facing. Just a few months later, we were back at Flag Fen telling you about a devastating fire at one of the reconstructed roundhouses.
the damage was really severe, and you wouldn't think that there was anything positive that could come from it. But what really inspired me was learning at the time that archaeologists and historians can actually learn quite a lot from the roundhouse that burnt down, because they can use it, because they know how it burnt down. They can use that knowledge to find out more about what happened to ancient, real roundhouses thousands of years ago when they burnt down too. So it's like this phoenix from the flames, from this horrible disaster at Flag Fen. There can be some positives.
Back in the summer, Time Team spent a whole month at Sutton Hoo, an iconic site home to huge Anglo-Saxon burial mounds containing ships and buried treasure, including the enigmatic Sutton Hoo helmet.
Yeah, and after a very successful dig in 2024, we were back to finish the job in 2025, and the podcast followed every twist and turn.
Now, Jacq McKinley joined us on site. She had the honour of carrying out the micro-excavation of the base of the famous Broomswell bucket, which we uncovered in our 2024 season.
And as I was making my way back from exploring Edith Pretty's house, she told Helen all about it.
Well, I do micro-excavation of vessels, cremation urns on a fairly regular basis. But of course, the difference here is it's a metal object that you're taking things out of, and it's slightly different. Now, we'd had some fantastic sort of imagery done beforehand, CT scans and fancy whizzy stuff that had shown us an impression of what was going to be in there. But of course, that doesn't give you everything. You have to take the material out of there. So there were quite a few of us in York. We went up to York and in the conservation lab there. So there was a conservator, Sophie. Justin was there taking 3D images of everything at different stages.
Lovely.
And Naomi was also there in order to go through the material that we took out of the vessel and make sure there wasn't any organic material in it. So we're looking for things like pollen, stuff like that, because of course having the metal there.
Yeah, it's so good for preservation, isn't it?
Yeah,
yes.
It will help potentially preserve organic materials that you wouldn't get, say, in a ceramic vessel in the same way.
And I remember that from Winfarthing. Naomi got the most extraordinary results out of the contents of the bowl at Winfarthing, which of course was in an incubation, so didn't contain any bones.
Well, of course, what tends to be, you've got payoff. If you get good organics, the chances are you are in an acidic burial environment, such as we have here, in which case the bone doesn't preserve very well. And vice versa, if you've got more alkaline burial environment, the bone preserves, but your organics don't. So there's always a payoff one way or the other.
Yeah. So, but what was the bone like? That's the $1 million question.
Well, surprisingly good.
Hello, everybody. Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, you come at a good point, because I couldn't wait for Jacq to get to it herself. I've just said, what was the bone like?
We do need to know this.
This is the $1 million question,
Absolutely.
isn't it? How much was there, and how much could you identify?
Well, it's actually very intriguing from my point of view, because like I said, I do quite a lot of this sort of stuff, and I've done quite a lot of Anglo-Saxon burial remains. Now, we knew from the CT scan that roughly where things started, the depth of material we'd expect, and it was actually quite shallow. And one of the first things we found was the remains of a bone comb. Now, so this is a composite bone comb, so it's made up of several segments of bone comb, and it's two-sided with a plate down the middle that holds it together. You know all about this sort of thing.
Yes, but the fact that you found it first, does that mean that it was on the top?
Yes.
It had been put in after the bones.
Exactly.
And it wasn't burnt?
No, it was a grave good, not a pyre good. Now, I know we've discussed this before, but
sometimes it doesn't matter when you're just saying what was put in with the burial. But at this point, it does matter.
It does matter. This was put on top of the bone. It was only added to the whole rite at the time of burial. It wasn't there at the time of cremation. The bone itself, what was interesting was we could see from the distribution of the bone, it hadn't just been put inside this vessel. It didn't spread all across the base of the vessel. It was set over slightly to one side. Now, that to me says it was in a bag originally. It didn't just go straight into the vessel. It was in a bag. The bag was slightly displaced to one side. And as I said, it was actually quite a shallow depth. So once we'd got the remains very carefully, I left that to Sophie to lift the bone comb, because the main bits of the comb weren't too bad. You know, the actual sort of bit, the central bit that holds everything together, but the teeth were actually quite fragile.
I bet they were, yeah.
So I handed over to Sophie to let her lift those bits so that I could just say, not my fault, mate, you know. If it's gone wrong, not my problem.
It's always good to have loads of specialists around, isn't it?
Yeah.
So some amazing discoveries then already, but what work is still left to do?
Well, I have actually finished now doing my identification of the bone. A lot of it looked to me like animal bone. And in fact, the vast majority of it is animal bone. That's why I think there is something really interesting going on here, because these are a different type of deposit. It is so complex and there's a lot we do not yet understand, which is why I find what we're getting here really quite fascinating.
Oh, and you'll have to wait a little bit longer to find out exactly what we discovered at Sutton Hoo in 2025. Those films are actually in the works as we speak.
Yes, and one of the other stories we've been following from Sutton Hoo is what's taking place just across the River Deben from the site of Sutton Hoo in Woodbridge. Volunteers at the Sutton Hoo Ships Company are constructing a working experimental replica of the ship found in Mound 1 using traditional techniques.
And Jacq Barnard, the project manager, is here now. How's it going then, Jacq?
Hi, Martyn. Actually, it's going really well. Since we last saw you, we've pretty much finished almost up to strake 8. So remember, the ship has got 9 strakes or 9 rows of planking on each side. So we've been looking for one more really big oak tree to finish strake 8 before we do the 9th top strake, the garboard. And we found that. We found that in a National Trust site over in Wales. And so we're desperately trying to find a haulier that can go and pick that up for us so that we can cleave that and get that final strake done in the new year. So we're really chuffed at the moment because that big last tree has been a bit of a hurdle for us because they're just not about anymore. So it's all looking really good. Looks like a ship now.
Jacq, you're asking for people to help name the ship. Where did that idea come from?
Yes, we are. Well, we're all for, creating a community and getting people involved over here in the Longshed. I've just kind of put a fairly sort of long 18-month proposal together and put it to our trustees, suggesting that we actually invited people in to come up with names, because we know people have got lots of ideas and we know lots of people are really passionate about this ship. So it seemed like a really good call to try and involve people in the run-up to the launch, which will hopefully be somewhere in the middle of 2027.
Aren't you worried you're going to get, like Boaty McBoatface or something?
Well, there's always that possibility. No, we won't get that because of the way we're doing this. So it's not a vote. It's asking people to submit a name suggestion with a good reason, why they think that's really fitting for this type of vessel. We've had over 3,000 names submitted already. Some of them are quite funny, which we will share, but obviously we're looking for something beautiful for our ship, not Boaty McBoatface 2.
How long do people have to get their suggestions in?
Well, you'd think about 20 minutes at the rate that they came in when it was first announced. But no, we're keeping it open until last day of January. And that's when we will look at this really long list and start to shortlist into some feasible names, which we will then do a bit of research on before we present it to a panel of people who then start to kind of really look at it sort of intensely to see which name is most suitable. We will look for maybe 3, maybe 4 names that we really think fit the bill and probably go out to a public vote with those names so that we end up with something that we know is suitable for what we're doing.
Well, the very, very best of luck with it, Jacq, and you're going to have to come back on the podcast to reveal the chosen name.
Absolutely. Well, it'd be good to come on one day and share some of the other names before we actually get to that point. But no, it'd be great to see you again.
We're going to take you to another famous ship in just a moment, but first let's head to Italy, where Time Team's Giselle Kira was reporting from back in July. And just to warn you, Giselle's film contains images of human remains that you might find difficult to watch.
I'm here in the Dolomites. This is a mountainous region in the northernmost part of Italy, and it's famous for one massive archaeological discovery, Otzi the Iceman. Now, 2 hikers were just going along one of these paths when they happened to find a body. And at first people thought maybe this body is from World War I, maybe it's a more recent body. It was taken out, it was brought down to a museum, and it was found out that this body was actually 5,000 years old. And this is what it looks like, being looked after round the clock by scientists at South Tyrol Museum of Archaeology. Otzi is a wet mummy, meaning he was fully preserved in a wet environment, so he is regularly sprayed with sterile water for his conservation. Archaeologists and scientists suit up 4 or 5 times a year, spray his entire body with sterile water in sterile conditions, then place him back in his fridge freezer. It replicates the conditions in which he was naturally preserved, so that his body doesn't degrade further. Now, I wanted to find out a bit more about how Otzi got here, so back home I sat down for a chat with Andrea Dalpra, a guide at the museum.
It was really fortunately discovered from a couple of German tourists. They decided to hike at 3,200 meters of altitude in the Similaun Glacier. They come across with the upper side of the Iceman's body coming out from the ice.
I mean, he was in the ice, so he had to be preserved afterwards, so that way he doesn't decay, right? So what was the process of that like, bringing him down from the mountain? Did he come down in a freezer?
No, it didn't come down in a freezer. Actually, they put everything in a plastic bag and they ran to the Ainsworth helicopter. Fortunately for us, they called an archaeologist. And the archaeologist saw the body and saw the axe.
Hey.
This is just a replica, but he saw the axe, and when he saw the axe, he said, oh my God, I can't believe it. This must be very old. At that time, he thought it was 4,000 years old. So he said, put it back on the freezer, please.
Now, the axe was unlike anything ever found before. It changed the timeline of prehistory and pushed the Copper Age back 1,000 years earlier. Now, this early Neolithic body came with other things as well. It came with a backpack. It came with some goat and sheepskin trousers. It came with a dagger. It came with a bow, a quiver, and it was all in excellent condition because of the ice. There's so much we don't know about Otzi. Retracing his steps, it's so easy to imagine him walking across these mountains 5,000 years ago. Otzi is also famous for his tattoos. He has a series of small black lines that are all over his body. Now, we've got this on his ankles and on his hands and on his back, and it turns out that they actually correlate with points of pain that Otzi would have had. So arthritis, joint pain, back pain. Was this the earliest form of acupuncture?
62 tattoos in his body, just line and cross. 59 line and just 2 crosses. Those tattoos, they could be therapeutic tattoos. They appear to be close to the spot where he was suffering of most arthritic problems, but they are not on top of those problems. They are always right beside, right above, right behind. Most of those tattoos, but not all of them, they match with the most important spot of the Chinese agopuncture. That's a good field for further studies. Definitely.
Yes. With the advancement of science, we're learning more and more about Otzi all the time. We found out that he's got O-positive blood, we found out that he has brown hair, and that he had brown eyes, and we've even been able to have environmental archaeologists look at the cereals in his stomach, the last meal he ate before he died. But one of the real mysteries is why Otzi died. Alone in the snow, high up in the mountains. Did he get lost? Was it hypothermia? Or was it something far more sinister? Well, there's a fairly big clue. One of the most interesting things about Otzi is that he was found with an arrow lodged underneath his shoulder, and that would have nicked a major artery, causing him to lose lots and lots of blood, eventually causing him to die. Now, he would have just been walking on the mountain, just like I am now, and somebody would have spotted him, thought he was a threat, and fired. So we know that there was a murder that happened, but we don't know who did it, so it's quite an interesting little whodunit. We'll never know, of course, who fired that arrow. We'll never even know Otzi's real name. But the circumstances of his death have taught us so much about what life was like here thousands of years ago. You can now go see Otzi's body at the South Tyrol Archaeology Museum in Bolzano. He's housed inside of a large freezer, so that way it stops his body from deteriorating. And if you feel extra bold, you can go up a mountain and actually go to the spot where his body was found.
Ooh, pretty gruesome, isn't it? But that landscape there where Giselle was in the mountains in the Dolomites, so beautiful.
It is, isn't it? It's beautiful but dangerous. I mean, it's very high, it's very cold, and you want to be properly prepared if you're going to go up there even today.
Yeah, absolutely. So memorable though for Giselle getting to be out there and kind of walking in the footsteps of Otzi. Speaking of memorable, I need to talk about one of the most memorable visits for me in 2025, which was my trip to Portsmouth to see Henry VIII's flagship, the Mary Rose. Now, after sinking in battle in 1545, it was raised by archaeologists and divers in the 1980s and has been preserved ever since.
I'm so jealous of you, Martyn, because you got the amazing opportunity of going behind the scenes at the museum and seeing the ship at close quarters.
Well, so this is the airlock to go into the ship hall. So the ship hall inside, we've got conditioned air. So this airlock is to stop us ruining that conditioned air when we open the doors. We can head on in.
Okay. Wow. Wow. Look at that. That is incredible.
Martyn went one better than just being in the same room as the Mary Rose. He met up with Dr. Alex Hildred, one of the archaeologists who dived on the wreck over 40 years ago, who let him get even closer.
Alex, a pleasure to meet you and to meet somebody who has so much knowledge of this ship as an archaeologist, but also you were one of the first people to go down under the water and actually help to bring this ship up. What does it feel like standing here right next to it now in this scenario?
Well, I can see it for a start, as opposed to only seeing a small bit. I think it's marvellous because it's now bringing, the information that we've gained from it, the ship itself, and everybody can enjoy it, rather than just the 500 divers that worked between when it was first seen in 71 and 82 when it was lifted.
Well, I know you're keen for me to see it even closer than I am now, and you've arranged a little surprise.
An aerial ride, and you'll be able to see far more than we would ever see underwater, so be my guest.
Thank you, let's give it a go. Yeah, this was pretty scary, but I couldn't pass up the opportunity to see the Mary Rose at close quarters. Up we go. Alex is taking me up in a cherry picker used to carry out inspections of the ship as part of the restoration process. It's allowing us to put ourselves at deck height, making it even easier to imagine what it might have felt like on board.
She was 12 metres deep, so the sad thing is that she's 12 metres wide. She literally sank, turned over. What that meant for us, it was a 12-metre swim down a line to get to the seabed, and very rarely could you see up to a metre. A metre would be very good visibility. So a lot of it was feel, and a lot of it was dark, but it was also, I wouldn't say it's claustrophobic, it was very comforting. It was like you were being cradled by the ship. When you're working in a small area and it's just you and the sound of the airlift, there's nothing that as intense as that sort of concentration, because it's just you and what you're doing in that 96 minutes, depending on where we were in the ship, different dive times. Now everybody can share it. Here there's a big bronze gun going this way. The deck above here, this is a plank from another deck, you can just see the beginning of it, but along here, facing forwards, was another big bronze gun which would have come to here. You can see the hole there, and all along that rail, there are holes for swivel guns that have been blocked up in those cases, so there are no swivel guns anymore, but there are bigger ports for larger guns at the end, and then there's a big port here which had a large bronze gun in it. You can see that the ship has been transformed.
Oh, what a great way that is of understanding the layout of the ship, being level with the top deck where the cannons would have fired during her final battle just before she sank. There is so much that was brought up from the seabed that the Mary Rose Museum has got too much of it to be able to put it all on display. And in a nearby warehouse, Martyn caught up with conservation manager David Pearson to get a behind-the-scenes tour of some objects from the wreck with unique stories to tell.
Hello. Hi, David.
Nice to meet you.
This is your little empire then, is it here?
Yes, this is our conservation facility.
Great. We've got some stuff to look at.
Yeah, come follow me.
It's not quite as beautiful as the museum, is it?
No, it's not quite as beautiful, but it's the things inside that are beautiful, and here's one of those. It's one of our anchors, one of 4 anchors we've raised from the wreck site, and it was raised in 2005, our most recent excavations. And it's actually one of the only whole anchor we've got, so both the flukes are intact and the ring as well. And you can even see some of the anchor cable down here still attached.
And this presumably isn't water here?
No,
What's in it?
So to preserve iron especially, we've got to remove the chloride, the salt that's within the iron. Otherwise, if you raise it from the sea, then dry it, it will start falling apart, start corroding. So we use alkaline solutions to remove that salt. And this is what this is. It's a pH 10 alkaline solution, and at this pH the iron won't corrode either. So we could store this in this tank forevermore and it wouldn't fall apart. It would stay passivated, is the term.
This warehouse is a proper treasure trove. Rooms and rooms dedicated to items found with the Mary Rose, which very few members of the public have had the chance to see, including objects that give clues to the ship's violent naval past.
So we're going to follow this way. We've got one of our artefact stores where we store the inorganic objects. And here we are.
Oh, wow. This is incredible. Cannonballs!
Yeah, so we've got some of the stone shot, which were fired out of the iron guns, and then we've got some of the iron shot that were fired out of the bronze cannons.
And how many are in here?
In here, we've probably got about 300 or 400 in total. But with the stone shot, we've got about 200 in the collection, some of which are worked into the shape that they'd have been fired, and then others are just rough cut bits of stone, because each gun had a different size bore on board, so they didn't know how many shot they'd need for each gun. So they'd take one rough cut and then chisel them to shape using wooden shot gauges, which is quite a lot of work, especially if you then miss with your shot.
You know, there are so many amazing objects in this warehouse. In fact, I've recorded a more detailed tour with David for Time Team members over on Patreon. All the finds from the Mary Rose, of course, need looking after with expert care. And David's taken me to meet some people who are learning the ropes.
So here we've got a couple of our interns who are cleaning some of our anchor cable for us. We've got about 180 metres of anchor cable in the collection. We clean it to go into our store.
Hello, everybody. Hello. Hi, this looks like amazing work. What are you doing here?
So we're currently conserving this piece of rope from the Mary Rose. So we're using a toothpick, we're using scalpels and a toothbrush to remove the silt from in between the bits of the rope that you can see here, but not the pitch, because that would have been as it was with the rope originally.
Is it slightly sort of monotonous work?
Wow.
It's a slow process, isn't it?
Just a little bit, yeah. After however many metres, it does become quite repetitive, and it's very in detail, so you have to look. Yeah, your eyes get a bit sore, but.
But you are working on a real working piece of the Mary Rose. What does that feel like?
Yeah. Oh, it's so exciting. I feel very honoured actually to be able to touch and, you know, handle this piece of history that's over 500 years old. It's absolutely fantastic.
Well,
it's wonderful.
I'll let you get on with it.
Thank you very much.
That just shows, doesn't it, that the Mary Rose was a fighting ship right up to the end. I mean, it's really fascinating, if slightly horrifying, to see exactly how she was equipped as the most sophisticated fighting machine of her time, and to see all the craftsmanship that went into her and all of the detail and the care that's now being taken to understand and preserve her.
Yeah, it was an amazing trip. I did feel so lucky to get up close and personal with so many, well, the ship itself, but so many of those personal items as well that made you feel like you knew someone who'd been on board. Really, really special. That is pretty much where we have to leave, I'm afraid, our look back at some of the things that we got up to on the Time Team podcast in 2025. We're returning, though, for more this year. What are you looking forward to, Helen, then in 2026?
Yes. What are we hoping to do? There's so many things that we're carrying on, working on, aren't there? And I sometimes feel like I've got all these plates spinning in the air. I know I've got a lot of work to do on Brancaster before we get there. I've got to produce all of the finds that have come from Brancaster up until now and sort out the coin lists for somebody to do the coin profiles on. So that's a lot of research that we have to do in the background before we can design the project there. Then there's keeping an eye on King's Lynn and making sure that nothing happens that we haven't filmed. I am also doing the same for the ship. But I think, Martyn, you've got slightly more of a finger on the pulse with this, haven't you? So you get a heads up as to what might be coming along the track before even I do.
Well, the thing I'm just sort of now obsessed with, ever since we spoke to John Gator about it, and so are loads of people, actually. We had such a good reaction to this.
Yeah.
It's what's happening on Orkney. It's
Yes.
Nessa Brodgar, isn't it? And we're going to be going there in 2026. I cannot wait to find out what they've discovered.
Yes, well, people keep saying to me, well, you must know. He must have told you. What is it? What is it that he's found that he won't tell anybody? And I have to say, no, well, I'm the last to know. I have got no idea.
We can't keep secrets. They don't tell us. They don't tell us for very, very good reason.
No.
So you see, there's so much to look forward to and to keep us busy in 2026. And we really do hope that you can join us for it.
Yes, and we'll speak to you on next week's edition of the Time Team podcast. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Join Time Team on Patreon to access exclusive 3D models, masterclasses, and behind-the-scenes insights.